He found her chained in the wreckage, her species extinct for 1,000 years. Dominic Torres didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in salvage rights, fuel costs, and the cold mathematics of survival at the edge of human space, which made the woman in the stasis pod impossible. He stood in what remained of the warship's medical bay, his helmet light cutting through the darkness. The vessel had been drifting for who knew how long, hull breached in a dozen places, life support dead, interior frozen to vacuum temperatures, the kind of wreck that should hold nothing but corpses and scrap metal. The pod hummed with residual power. Impossible. Dom checked his scanner 3 times, each reading identical. Active stasis, functional containment, and inside, she looked almost human. Almost. Deep violet skin, darker striations running along her arms and throat like shadow veins beneath the surface. Her face held an otherworldly beauty, cheekbones sharp enough to cut, lips slightly parted in suspended animation. Black hair drifted in the stasis fluid, and even unconscious, something about her posture suggested coiled violence. The chains were what made him hesitate. Heavy alloy restraints at her wrists and ankles, anchored to the pod's interior frame. Not medical equipment, prison hardware. Dom's calm crackled. "Torres, you finding anything worth the trip?" He should have said no. Should have backed out, sealed the hull breach, and reported the wreck to authorities. Let someone else deal with whatever this was. Instead, he found himself studying the pod's control interface. "Yeah, might need another hour." "Copy. We're reading some weird energy signatures on long range. Could be debris, could be trouble. Don't take too long." The warning barely registered. Dom was already translating the alien script on the pod's display, his neural implant struggling with a language template that shouldn't exist. The database marked it as Veydrath, extinct for over a millennium. Wiped out in the Schism Wars, their homeworld cracked open by weapons humanity hadn't even imagined yet. He should leave. He should absolutely leave. His hand moved to the emergency release. The stasis field collapsed with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Fluid drained through hidden channels. The woman's eyes snapped open, gold irises with vertical pupils that fixed on him with predatory focus. She moved. Fast. The chains jerked her back mid-lunge, and she snarled, a sound that bypassed Dom's rational mind and hit something primal. Her fingers had curved into claws he hadn't noticed before, retractable and sharp. Dom stumbled backward, his hand going to the plasma cutter on his belt. Not a weapon, but it would have to do. She spoke. The language was harsh, guttural, nothing his implant could parse. Her gaze swept the ruined medical bay, taking in the frost-covered walls, the dead equipment, the void visible through hull breaches. Something shifted in her expression. Confusion, maybe, or horror. She tried again, this time in accented standard that sounded like she was tearing each word from memory. "Where? Where is my unit?" "Your unit?" Dom kept his distance, hand still on the cutter. "Lady, this ship's been dead a long time. You're the only life sign I've found." Her pupils contracted to slits. "How long?" "I don't know. Maybe." He checked his scanner's dating estimate on the hull damage. "Maybe 1,000 years, give or take a century." She went very still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence or breakdown. When she spoke again, her voice had gone flat. "Impossible." "Yeah, well, I'm looking at a Veydrath in a functioning stasis pod, so we're already in impossible territory." Recognition flickered across her face at the species name, followed by something that looked like grief. Her hands clenched, chains rattling. "Release me." "Not happening." "I am a warden, I was." She stopped, eyes unfocusing. "I was defending the threshold. My unit was, they were with me." Dom's implant finally caught up with the translation. "Warden, the Veydrath elite guard, trained from childhood, supposedly capable of taking on entire squads single-handed." Great. He'd woken up super soldier Sleeping Beauty. "Look," he said carefully, "I don't know what happened to your people, but they're gone. Have been for a long time. And I'm not letting you out of those chains until I know you're not going to rip my throat out." Her gaze snapped back to him, sharp and assessing. Those gold eyes tracked every micro-movement, his weight distribution, the tension in his shoulders, the position of his hand near the cutter. She was reading him like tactical data. "You are human," she said. "Yeah, humans were primitives, barely spacefaring. We've had a few good years." She tilted her head, and her ears, he'd missed those in the pod, hidden by her hair, twitched slightly. Pointed and mobile, they tracked sounds he couldn't hear. "I hear 3 heartbeats on this vessel. You, 2 others distant. Your crew." Dom's blood went cold. She could hear his crew from here, through vacuum-sealed bulkheads. "They're not a threat to you. Everything is a threat until proven otherwise." But she wasn't looking at him anymore. Her attention had shifted to something beyond the walls, her expression tightening. "And something else approaches. Not your vessel. Multiple engine signatures. Military grade." His scanner wasn't showing anything yet, but Dom trusted her hearing more than his equipment. "How many?" "4 ships. Small, fast." Her eyes met his again. "Hunters." The word sent ice down his spine. Corporate hunters meant salvage claim jumpers at best, slavers at worst. And if they'd been tracking this wreck— "They're not here for me," Dom said. "No." She pulled against her chains, testing them with methodical precision. The alloy held, but the mounting points in the pod groaned. "They are here for me, for what I represent." "Which is?" "Proof that the Veydrath survived, genetic material from an extinct species." Her voice turned bitter. "I am worth more than this entire vessel." Dom's mind raced through options. His ship, the Nomad, was fast, but not armed for combat. His crew, just Riene and old Caspar, knew salvage, not warfare. And releasing a potentially hostile alien soldier seemed like a spectacularly bad idea. The decision was made for him when his scanner screamed an alert. 4 contacts, closing fast, ETA 6 minutes. "If I release you," Dom said, "how do I know you won't kill me?" She smiled. It wasn't reassuring. "You do not. But if you leave me here, they will take me, and when I eventually escape, I will remember the human who abandoned me." That's not exactly building trust. Trust is earned through action, not words. You have 5 minutes to decide. Dom swore and moved to the pod. The restraint controls were encrypted, but his implant made short work of the ancient security. The chains released with a metallic clatter. She stepped out of the pod, and Dom realized he'd underestimated her height. She stood a full head taller than him, her body lean and muscular beneath the strange material of her uniform. The violet skin seemed to shift in the light, striations darker along her spine and shoulders. She rotated her wrists, working feeling back into her limbs. Then she looked at him with those unsettling gold eyes. "I am Erithya. I will not kill you, human, not today." "Dominic, Dom." He gestured toward the corridor. "We need to move. My ship's at the main docking port." She nodded and started forward. Her movement was fluid despite a millennium in stasis, predatory grace that made him instinctively keep his distance. They were halfway to the corridor when she stopped, ears swiveling. "They are boarding. Starboard bay. That's between us and my ship. Then we go through them." Dom wanted to argue, wanted to suggest stealth or alternate routes. But the look on her face, cold, tactical, absolutely certain, suggested that going through them was exactly what she intended. He unsealed the corridor access. "Try not to kill anyone if you can help it." Erithya's smile returned. "I make no promises." The warship's corridors were a maze of frost and darkness, but Erithya moved through them with eerie confidence. She navigated by memory or instinct. Dom couldn't tell which. Her ears tracked sounds he couldn't perceive, and twice she pulled him into side passages seconds before his scanner picked up movement ahead. They reached an observation deck overlooking the starboard bay. Below, 4 figures in tactical gear swept the area with military precision. Heavy armor, energy weapons that made his plasma cutter look like a toy. Definitely not standard salvage crew. Corporate security, Dom whispered. Probably Meridian Group. They've been expanding into this sector. Erithya studied them with clinical detachment. 4 hostiles, standard sweep pattern, poor spatial awareness. She glanced at him. You have weapons? Just the cutter. Stay here. Before he could protest, she dropped through a broken viewport into the bay below. 20 meters straight down. She landed in a crouch that barely made a sound. The nearest guard turned, too late. Erithya moved like liquid violence, closing the distance before he could raise his weapon. Her hand struck his throat, precise and brutal. He went down choking. The others reacted, but she was already moving. Combat training that was 1,000 years old and still viciously effective. She used their formations against them, staying close enough that they couldn't fire without hitting each other. A disarm, a throw that sent one guard crashing into bulkhead plating, a kick that shattered the third guard's knee. The last one got a shot off. The energy bolt caught Erithya in the shoulder, spinning her. She snarled and surged forward, driving her elbow into his helmet with enough force to crack the visor. Silence fell. 4 guards down in less than 30 seconds. Dom stared. He'd read the reports about Veydrath Wardens, the legends about their combat capabilities. Reading and witnessing were very different things. Erithya swayed, pressing a hand to her wounded shoulder. Dark blood, nearly black, seeped between her fingers. Dom dropped through the viewport. His mag boots cushioned the landing, and he ran to her side. How bad? Manageable. But her breathing had gone shallow, and when she moved her hand, he could see the burn had gone deep. We need to get you to my ship. Renee's got medical training. She nodded, allowing him to support some of her weight. Together they moved toward the docking port, past the groaning guards, and through corridors that seemed to close in with every step. His comm crackled. Dom, we've got company. 4 ships just latched onto the wreck and they're not broadcasting salvage codes. I know. Get the Nomad ready for emergency departure. We're coming in hot. We. Explain later. Just be ready. They burst into the docking port. The Nomad waited, her hull scarred but solid, airlock open. Renee stood in the entrance, her dark eyes widening as she took in Erithya. What the hell? Later. Dom practically shoved Erithya through the airlock. Caspar, disengage clamps and get us out of here. The ship shuddered as docking clamps released. Through the viewport, Dom saw figures in tactical gear emerging from the warship's corridors. Energy fire sparked against the Nomad's hull. They're shooting at us, Renee's voice pitched high. Then shoot back. We don't have weapons. I know, just go. The Nomad's engines roared to life. They pulled away from the wreck as more weapons' fire stitched across their hull. Alarms screamed. The ship lurched into open space, and Caspar's voice came over the intercom, steady despite the chaos. Strap in. This is going to get rough. Dom secured Erithya into a crash seat, then took his own position as the Nomad accelerated. Through the viewport, he watched the 4 hunter ships detach from the warship and give chase. Erithya's eyes tracked them with predatory focus. They will not stop. I am too valuable. Yeah, well. Dom checked the tactical display. They're faster than us and we're not armed. Any brilliant ancient warrior strategies come to mind? She was quiet for a moment, her hand pressed to her bleeding shoulder. When she spoke, her voice had gone distant. The threshold stations had emergency protocols, self-destruct sequences meant to deny the enemy strategic assets. Dom's blood went cold. You want to blow up the warship. The power core still functions, minimally, but with the right cascade failure. She met his eyes. It would destroy the wreck and everything within a 5-kilometer radius. That's insane. That is survival. Her ears flattened against her skull. They will dissect me in a laboratory, study me, use my genetics to resurrect my people as slaves or weapons. I have already lost everything. I will not become a curiosity for your corporations. The weight in her voice hit him harder than he expected. She wasn't just talking about death. She was talking about the extinction of everything she'd known, everyone she'd loved, reduced to genetic patents and profit margins. Dom looked at Riene, who was monitoring the pursuing ships. How much of a head start would we need? To get clear of a 5-click blast radius, Riene ran the calculations. 3 minutes, maybe 4 if Caspar pushes the engines past safety limits. Which would probably burn out half our systems, Dom muttered. Better than being vaporized. Riene's expression was grim. Dom turned back to Erithya. Can you do it remotely? No, the core is shielded. I would need to access it directly. She saw the question forming. It is a manual override. Someone must stay behind. Absolutely not. There is no other way. Then we find one. Dom's mind raced. The warship systems were ancient, but the power core. If he could rig a delayed detonation, create a feedback loop in the containment field. I can do it, he said. Give me the sequence, and I'll set it remotely while you guide us through the corridors. We'll have time to get clear. Erithya studied him with those gold eyes. Why? Why what? Why risk yourself for me? You do not know me. You do not know if I am worth saving. Dom met her gaze. Your people are gone. Someone should have tried to save them back then. I'm trying now. That enough? Something shifted in her expression. Not quite trust, but maybe the beginning of it. She nodded slowly. The sequence is complex. I will need to interface with your ship systems. Riene, can we? Already on it. Riene pulled up a console, patching her through. Erithya moved to the console despite her wound, her fingers dancing over controls with practiced ease. Code scrolled across the screen, alien script that morphed into something Riene's systems could parse. Got it, Riene breathed. That's beautiful. Completely insane, but beautiful. How long for the cascade? Dom asked. 5 minutes once we trigger it. Erithya pulled her hand back. But you must be within range to initiate the sequence, close enough for their weapons to target you effectively. Of course, nothing could be simple. Dom took the pilot's seat, overriding Caspar's autopilot. Caspar, I need you on damage control. Riene, monitor those hunter ships. Erithya, he glanced back at her. Strap in and try not to bleed on my deck. Her lips twitched. I make no promises. The Nomad banked hard, looping back toward the wreck. The hunter ships adjusted course immediately, weapons fire intensifying. Dom's hands flew across the controls, weaving between debris fields and using the warship's bulk for cover. In range, Riene called. Sending the sequence now. Dom watched the tactical display as data streamed toward the ancient power core. The wreck systems flickered, waking from their long sleep. Cascade initiated, Erithya said. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Then let's not be here when it goes off. Dom punched the throttles. The Nomad surged forward, engines screaming. The hunter ships followed, closing the gap. Energy fire battered the Nomad's shields, alarms shrieking as systems went critical. 3 minutes, Erithya's voice stayed eerily calm. Hull integrity at 60%, Caspar reported. Shields failing, Riene added. Dom gritted his teeth and dove through a field of frozen debris, using the wreckage for cover. The hunters followed, their smaller ships more maneuverable but vulnerable to collisions. One hunter ship caught a piece of hull plating and spun out. Another broke off to assist. 2 minutes. The remaining hunters pressed harder. One pulled alongside the Nomad, trying to force them back toward the wreck. Erithya unbuckled her harness. What are you doing? Dom didn't take his eyes off the controls. Their targeting systems focus on your engines and command deck. She moved toward the airlock. If I give them a different target, they will divide their attention. You're wounded. I am functional. She was already sealing her suit. 1 minute, 30 seconds. You need distance. Before he could stop her, she cycled the airlock and jumped. Dom watched through the external cameras as she bounded across the Nomad's hull, her magnetic boots keeping her anchored. She reached the starboard side and did the unthinkable. She jumped toward the nearest hunter ship, 20 meters of open space. Vacuum and certain death if she missed. She didn't miss. Erithya crashed against the hunter's hull, her claws finding purchase in the plating. The ship veered wildly as her presence interfered with their sensors. 1 minute. Dom accelerated, putting distance between the Nomad and the chaos behind them. Through the cameras, he saw Erithya moving along the hunter's hull, her hands working at what looked like an access panel. 40 seconds. Dom, we need to go, Rione's voice cracked. He should leave her, should save his crew and his ship. But his hands were already reversing thrust, bringing the Nomad around. Erithya ripped the panel free and tore into the hunter ship's systems. Sparks fountained into space. The ship's engines stuttered and died. She jumped back toward the Nomad, and Dom brought the ship beneath her trajectory. She hit the hull hard, mag boots engaging. 20 seconds. Airlock, Dom shouted. Erithya scrambled across the hull. The airlock cycled too slow, always too slow, and she tumbled inside just as the seal engaged. 10 seconds. Dom didn't wait. He pushed the engines past redline, and the Nomad shot forward like she'd been fired from a cannon. Behind them, the warship's power core reached critical mass. The explosion was silent in vacuum, but devastating in scope. A sphere of brilliant light expanded outward, consuming the wreck and the hunter ships in an instant. The shockwave hit the Nomad seconds later, tossing them forward with violent force. Alarms screamed. Hull plating shrieked. Dom fought the controls as the ship tumbled through space. Then, gradually, they stabilized. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of labored breathing and sparking circuits. Everyone alive? Dom's voice came out rough. Alive, Caspar confirmed. Barely, Rione added. Dom looked toward the airlock. Erithya emerged, her suit scorched, her violet skin pale beneath the blood and burns. She swayed, caught herself on the bulkhead. Their eyes met. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't mention it. Dom unbuckled and moved to help her. Rione, medical bay, now. Together, they got Erithya secured on the med table. Rione worked with efficient precision, cleaning the energy burn on her shoulder, injecting broad-spectrum antibiotics that might or might not work on alien biology. Erithya endured it stoically, her gold eyes tracking Rione's movements. When the worst was bandaged and the bleeding stopped, she finally spoke. Where will you take me? Dom exchanged a glance with Rione. They'd been so focused on survival, he hadn't thought that far ahead. There's a station at the edge of this sector, he said carefully. Neutral territory. We can drop you there, help you figure out what comes next. And if I have nowhere to go? The question hung in the air. Dom thought about the warship, the chains, the 1,000 years of loss compressed into a few hours of consciousness. He thought about a woman who'd woken to find everything, and everyone she'd known was dust. Then I guess you stay with us, he heard himself say. Until you figure it out. Rione's eyebrows shot up, but she didn't contradict him. Erithya was quiet for a long moment. Her ears twitched, tracking sounds, probably the hum of the Nomad's engines, the whisper of air through vents, the steady rhythm of their heartbeats. I do not trust easily, she said finally. Neither do I, and I may bring more hunters. More danger. Yeah, probably. Then why? Dom thought about his answer. About the real reason he'd released her from those chains, blown up a priceless archaeological find, and nearly gotten his crew killed. Because you deserve better than being the last of anything, he said. And because, he hesitated, because I think we could use someone like you, if you're willing. Erithya's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Her hand moved to her shoulder, fingers brushing the bandage. I was trained to protect, to defend. I do not know how to be anything else. Maybe you don't have to be anything else. Dom pulled up a chair, ignoring the exhaustion pulling at his bones. Maybe you just need to find new people to protect. Her lips twitched. Is that an offer, Dominic Torres? It's a possibility. He met her gaze. Take your time, think about it. We're not going anywhere for a while. Half our systems are fried, and Caspar's probably going to yell at me for what I did to the engines. He already is, Rione interjected. Over the intercom, very colorfully. Despite everything, the pain, the loss, the impossible weight of being the last, Erithya laughed. It was a raw sound, broken at the edges, but genuine. And Dom found himself smiling back. The Nomad limped through space, systems failing one by one, but still flying. In the medical bay, 3 people who'd been strangers hours ago sat in complicated silence, processing survival and something that might eventually become trust. It wasn't peace, it wasn't safety, but it was a beginning, and for now, that was enough. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of repairs and careful distance. Erithya kept to the cargo bay, sleeping in brief, restless cycles that spoke of a warrior's training. Dom caught her sometimes, sitting cross-legged in the center of the empty space, her eyes closed and her breathing slowed to something that barely seemed alive. Meditation, Riene explained when he asked. I think. Caspar says her vital signs drop so low, it's almost like stasis. Dom watched through the bay's observation window. Erithya's striations seemed darker during these sessions, her skin taking on a deeper violet hue. Sometimes her lips moved, forming words in a language dead 1,000 years. What's she saying? No idea. The translator can't parse it. Old Veydrath, maybe, before the language diverged into the regional dialects we have on record. Riene's expression turned thoughtful. You know what's weird? She's getting better at standard. Like, rapidly. 3 days ago, she could barely string a sentence together. Now she's practically fluent. Maybe it's coming back to her. Or maybe her species had some kind of linguistic adaptation capability. Riene shook her head. We barely know anything about the Veydrath beyond the propaganda, and that's 1,000 years out of date. Dom filed that away and kept watching. Erithya's eyes opened, gold irises fixing on him through the observation glass. She'd known he was there the whole time. Those ears didn't miss anything. She stood and crossed to the door. When it cycled open, she tilted her head. You watch me often, making sure you're okay. I am functional. That's not the same as okay. Her ears flattened slightly. No, it is not. An invitation, maybe. Dom stepped into the bay. Want to talk about it? About what? About waking up to find everyone you knew is dead. About being hunted by corporations who want to turn you into a science experiment. About any of it. Erithya was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. Talking changes nothing. Sometimes it helps anyway. She moved to the bay's viewport, looking out at the endless dark. Stars reflected in her eyes, ancient light from distant suns. I remember my unit. Their faces, their voices. The way Kelvin would laugh at her own terrible jokes. How Thuron always checked his weapon 3 times before combat. Lysa's singing when she thought no one could hear. Her hand pressed against the glass. I remember the day the threshold fell, the enemy pouring through our defenses. We were ordered to evacuate, but Lysa was wounded, and Thuron refused to leave her. So none of us did. What happened? I do not know. The blast hit, and I woke in stasis. She turned to face him. They are gone, Dominic. Everything I swore to protect, everyone I loved, gone to dust while I slept. The grief in her voice was visceral. Dom wanted to offer comfort, but what could you say to someone who'd lost an entire species? Sorry seemed inadequate. Instead, he moved to stand beside her at the viewport. For what it's worth, I don't think they'd want you to feel guilty for surviving. How would you know? Because if I was in their position, I'd want you to live, to find something worth living for, even if it wasn't the life you expected. Erithya studied him with those unsettling eyes. You speak from experience. It wasn't a question. Dom found himself answering anyway. I had a family once. Wife, daughter. They were on a station when the life support failed. I was on a supply run, too far away to help. His throat tightened. By the time I got there, it was over. I kept their things for a while. Photos, clothes, thought maybe holding on to them would keep them alive somehow. What changed? I realized I wasn't honoring them. I was building a shrine to my guilt. He met her gaze. They wouldn't have wanted that. They would have wanted me to keep living. And do you keep living? I salvage, I keep moving. I don't let myself think too hard. He managed a weak smile. Not sure that counts as living, but it's what I've got. Erithia's expression softened. Her hand moved, hesitant, uncertain, and came to rest on his shoulder. The touch was light, almost questioning. Thank you, she said quietly, for understanding. The moment stretched between them, fragile and tentative. Dom was acutely aware of her hand, the warmth of her skin through his shirt, the way her thumb brushed against his collarbone almost absently. Then Rione's voice crackled over the intercom. Dom, we've got a problem. You need to see this. The moment shattered. Erithya withdrew her hand, and they both moved toward the bridge. Rione had pulled up long-range scans. We're being followed, one ship keeping pace at maximum sensor range. They're good, I almost missed them. Dom studied the contact. Configuration: private vessel, fast, armed, but not military grade. Rione enhanced the image. Could be another salvage crew, but the timing's suspicious. They tracked us from the wreck, Erithya said, her voice gone flat. Meridian Group is not easily deterred. We can outrun them, Dom said. The Nomad might be half dead, but she's still faster than most corporate buckets. For how long? Erithya crossed her arms. You have limited fuel, damaged systems. They will wait until you are vulnerable, then strike. So what do you suggest? Her eyes gleamed with tactical assessment. We turn and face them, on our terms, not theirs. With what weapons? In case you haven't noticed, we're a salvage ship, not a warship. You have me. She said it with absolute certainty. Lure them in, offer surrender. When they board, I will neutralize them. That's suicide. No, that is what I was trained for. Erithya turned to face him fully. You saved my life, Dominic Torres. Allow me to preserve yours. Dom looked at Rione, who was watching the exchange with undisguised concern. This is insane. Welcome to your life these past few days, Rione muttered. He wanted to refuse, wanted to find a safer option, some clever salvager's trick that would get them out of this without violence. But Erithya was right, they couldn't run forever. Okay, he said finally. We do this smart. Rione, send a distress call, make it look like our engines failed. Erithya, you hide in the cargo bay. When they board, I will handle it, Erithya interrupted. You will stay safe. Like hell, this is my ship. And I am a warden, this is what I do. Her hand found his shoulder again, grip firm. Trust me? The weight of those words settled between them. Trust. The thing neither of them did easily, offered like a fragile gift. Dom nodded slowly. Okay, but if you die, I'm going to be very annoyed. Erithya's lips curved. Noted. The trap was set within the hour. The Nomad drifted, engines dark, broadcasting a carefully crafted distress signal. Dom and Rione waited on the bridge, weapons within reach, while Erithya concealed herself in the shadows of the cargo bay. The pursuing ship closed slowly, cautious despite the apparent vulnerability. When they latched onto the Nomad's airlock, Dom's pulse hammered against his ribs. 5 hostiles, Erithya's voice whispered through the comm. Standard boarding formation. They expect minimal resistance. The airlock cycled. Footsteps echoed through the corridor, heavy boots, tactical gear. Dom waited, counting seconds. When the boarding team reached the bridge entrance, he raised his hands in surrender. Don't shoot, we're unarmed. The team leader, a woman with cold eyes and meridian patches on her armor, swept the bridge with her weapon. Where is she? Who? Don't play stupid. The Veydrath. We tracked your energy signature from the wreck. Where is she? Gone, Dom lied. Took an escape pod 2 days ago. We haven't seen her since. The leader's expression hardened. Search the ship. 3 of her team spread out, moving through the Nomad with brutal efficiency. Dom listened to their progress through the comm, heard them clear the medical bay, the crew quarters, the engine room. Cargo bay, one called. Checking now. Silence. Then chaos. Gunfire erupted. Someone screamed. The ship's internal sensors went wild as energy weapons discharged at close range. Contact, Contact. She's... The transmission cut off. The team leader's expression flickered with something that might have been fear. She grabbed Dom by the collar, weapon pressed to his temple. Call her off, now. Can't do that. Dom kept his voice steady despite the weapon against his skull. She doesn't take orders from me. More gunfire. Another scream, this one cut short. The leader's comm crackled. Team down. Repeat, team. Static. She shoved Dom away and ran toward the cargo bay, her remaining teammate following. Dom and Renee exchanged a look, then moved after them. They found the cargo bay's entrance sealed, the door mechanism sparking. Through the observation window, they saw the aftermath. 4 bodies on the deck, unconscious or dead. Erithya stood in the center, her violet skin streaked with blood, some hers, most not. Her breathing came hard and fast, gold eyes bright with combat high. The team leader raised her weapon, but Erithya moved first. She dove sideways, impossibly fast, and the energy bolt struck the bulkhead behind her. Before the leader could adjust her aim, Erithya was there, a blur of violet and violence. The fight lasted seconds. Erithya disarmed the leader with a strike to the wrist, then swept her legs. The woman hit the deck hard, and Erithya's hand closed around her throat. Wait! Dom's voice cut through the moment. Don't kill her. Erithya's grip tightened. For a heartbeat, Dom thought she'd ignore him. Then, slowly, she released the leader and stepped back. The woman gasped for air, clutching her throat. Leave, Erithya said, her voice rough. Tell Meridian Group that I am not to be hunted. Tell them that I am protected. Tell them that the next team they send will not receive mercy. The leader nodded frantically. Erithya hauled her to her feet and shoved her toward the airlock. The woman stumbled, gathered her unconscious teammates, and retreated. When the airlock cycled and their ship detached, Dom let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Erithya swayed, and he caught her before she fell. Her weight against him was solid, real. She was trembling, adrenaline crash, maybe, or delayed shock. You okay? His hands found her shoulders, steadying her. I am functional. But her voice shook. That's not what I asked. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Blood streaked her face, her uniform torn, but she was whole. Alive. I have not fought like that in... I cannot remember how long. It felt terrifying, familiar. Her expression crumpled. I hated how familiar it felt. Dom understood. The muscle memory of violence, the training that never quite left. He'd seen it in soldiers, in people who'd been forced to become weapons. Come on, he said gently. Let's get you cleaned up. This time, she didn't protest. She let him guide her to the medical bay, let Renee tend her wounds while he watched from the doorway. Later, when the injuries were bandaged and the blood washed away, Erithya sat on the edge of the med table and looked at him. I owe you another debt, she said quietly. You don't owe me anything. You stopped me from killing her. Yeah. Why? Dom thought about his answer. Because once you start down that road, it's hard to come back, and I don't think you want to be that person anymore. Erithya's ears flattened. I was designed to be that person, trained from childhood to kill efficiently. You were also trained to protect, to defend. That's not the same as being a killer. He moved closer, cautious but deliberate. You've lost everything, Eri. Don't lose yourself too. She blinked at the nickname, something shifting in her expression. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. What if that is all I have left to lose? Dom's chest tightened. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand found hers. Her skin was warm, the striations darker where they crossed her knuckles. Then we'll figure out who you are now, he said. Together. If you want. Her fingers tightened around his. I do not know how. Neither do I, but we've got time. Erithya looked down at their joined hands, her thumb brushing across his palm. The touch was tentative, exploratory, like she was learning what gentleness felt like. Dominic, she said softly. Yeah, thank you, she met his eyes. For seeing me, not just the weapon, but me. The moment hung between them, weighted with everything they weren't saying. Dom felt his heartbeat kick up, felt the pull of something he'd thought long dead. Then Renee cleared her throat from the doorway. Hate to interrupt, but Caspar says we're approaching the neutral station. ETA, 2 hours. The spell broke. Erithya released his hand, and Dom stepped back. Right, he said. I should help with docking prep. I will clean the cargo bay. Erithya slid off the med table, her movements careful. Remove evidence of the fight. They moved past each other, and for just a moment, their shoulders brushed. The contact sent electricity down Dom's spine. He made himself keep walking. The neutral station, Haven's Rest, floated at the edge of charted space, a patchwork of modules and docking rings that had grown organically over decades. No single government claimed jurisdiction, which made it perfect for those who wanted to disappear. The Nomad docked without incident, and Dom met with the station administrator, a grizzled woman named Corva who asked no questions and accepted his credit chips without comment. Berth 23 is yours for the month, she said. Longer if you need. We don't care what you're running from, long as you don't bring trouble to our doorstep. Trouble's not following us. Good, because we've got enough of our own. She glanced past him to where Erithya stood near the airlock, her violet skin drawing stares from passing station residents. Your friend's gonna attract attention. She can handle it, Corva snorted. I don't doubt it, just keep things peaceful, Torres, I like you. They explored the station together, Dom, Renee, Caspar, and Erithya. The markets were a chaotic mix of species and cultures. Vendors hawking everything from legal salvage to questionable medical supplies. Erithya moved through it all with wide eyes, taking in the diversity. There are so many species, she murmured. Working together, living together. In my time, this would have been unthinkable. A lot's changed in 1,000 years. Apparently. She paused at a stall selling what looked like ancient artifacts. Her hand hovered over a piece of carved stone, her expression unreadable. That's Veydrath, the vendor said, perking up. Authentic pre-schism artistry, very rare. I can give you a good price. Erithya's fingers brushed the carving. This is a memorial stone. We carved them for the dead, to preserve their memory. Her voice went tight. It should not be sold in a market. The vendor shifted uncomfortably. I acquired it legally. I am certain you did. Erithya withdrew her hand, but it is still wrong. Dom stepped in, pulling out credit chips. How much? Dom, Erithya started. How much? He repeated. The vendor named a price, and Dom paid it without haggling. He handed the stone to Erithya, who held it like something precious and fragile. You did not have to do that. I know. He met her eyes. Consider it a gift, or an investment in your peace of mind, whichever. Something softened in her expression. She tucked the stone carefully into her pocket. Thank you. They continued through the markets, and gradually, Erithya began to relax. She asked questions about the species they encountered, the technology on display, the social structures that allowed such diversity to coexist. By the time they returned to the Nomad, full dark cycle had fallen. The ship felt different somehow, less like a temporary refuge, and more like something approaching home. Renee and Caspar retreated to their quarters, leaving Dom and Erithya alone in the common area. She stood at the viewport, the memorial stone in her hands. What does it say? Dom asked. Lysa Vekrin, who sang even in darkness, whose light endures. Erithya's voice cracked. She was my friend, my unit sister. Dom moved to stand beside her. I'm sorry. She would have liked you. Erithya's lips curved in a sad smile. She always said I was too serious, that I needed someone to remind me how to laugh. Did you? Laugh, I mean? Sometimes, when Lysa was particularly ridiculous, or when Thuron tried to cook and nearly poisoned us all. The smile faded. It feels strange to remember them, like touching an old wound. It gets easier, Dom said quietly. Not better, but easier. Does it? He thought about his wife and daughter, the photos he'd finally let go of. Yeah, you learn to carry it differently. The weight doesn't get lighter, but you get stronger. Erithya set the memorial stone on the viewport ledge. I have been meditating, trying to access the cultural memory. Any luck? Fragments, impressions, nothing coherent. She turned to face him. But I remember enough to know that my people believed in cycles, death and rebirth, endings that seed new beginnings. What does that mean for you? I do not know yet. Her gaze dropped to his hands, then back to his face. But I am beginning to think that perhaps survival is not just about existing. Perhaps it is about choosing what comes next. The space between them felt charged. Dom was acutely aware of how close she stood, the faint scent of her skin, something like cinnamon and ozone, the way her breathing had synchronized with his. "Iri," he said softly. "Dominic." She stepped closer. "I need to ask you something." "Okay. When you look at me, what do you see?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean? Do you see a warden, a weapon, a curiosity to be studied?" Her hands twisted together. "Or do you see a person?" Dom held her gaze. "I see someone who's been through hell and came out the other side. Someone who's brave and scared and trying to figure out who they are. Someone who makes terrible tactical decisions but has a good heart." He reached out, fingers brushing her cheek. "I see you, Iri, just you." Her breath hitched. Her hand came up to cover his, holding it against her face. "I have not been just myself in a very long time, perhaps ever. Then maybe now's the time to start." They stood like that, suspended in the moment. Erithya's eyes searched his, looking for something, permission, maybe, or certainty. Then she closed the distance and kissed him. It was tentative at first, questioning. Her lips were soft, warmer than he expected. Dom's free hand found her waist, pulling her closer, and the kiss deepened. She tasted like uncertainty and hope and the promise of something new. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, her forehead came to rest against his. "Was that appropriate?" she asked. Dom laughed, breathless. "Yeah, very appropriate." "Good." Her arms wrapped around him, holding tight. "Because I wish to do it again. I'm not going to stop you." This time, the kiss was less hesitant. Erithya's hands threaded through his hair, and Dom let himself get lost in the feeling, the warmth of her, the way she fit against him, the soft sound she made when his hands traced the striations along her spine. When they finally pulled apart, her eyes were bright, her expression something between wonder and terror. "This is dangerous," she whispered. "Probably. I do not know how to do this, how to be close to someone." "Neither do I. Not anymore." Dom's thumb brushed her cheek. "But I'm willing to try if you are." Erithya was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Yes, I think I would like that." They stood together at the viewport, watching the stars and the gentle rotation of the station. Dom's arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. It felt natural, right in a way few things had in recent years. "What happens now?" Erithya asked. "I don't know. We've got the ship. We've got time. We could stay here or we could keep moving. Up to you. I do not have a destination." "Neither do I." Dom tightened his hold. "So we'll figure it out together." Erithya tilted her head to look up at him. "You would keep me with you, even knowing the danger I bring?" "Yeah, I would." "Why?" Dom thought about his answer. About the chains in the wreck, the explosion, the fight in the cargo bay. About a woman who'd lost everything and still chose to keep going. "Because you're worth it," he said simply. "And because I think maybe we're both tired of being alone." Her expression crumpled, just for a moment, before she mastered it. "I am not certain I know how to be anything else." "Then we'll learn together." She kissed him again, softer this time. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me a reason to try." Dom didn't have words for that. He just held her and watched the stars and let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could build something from the wreckage. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm. The Nomad needed extensive repairs, which gave them time on Haven's Rest. Dom worked with Caspar on the engines, while Renee handled systems updates. Erithya helped where she could, her strength and precision making her invaluable for the heavy work. But it was the quiet moments that mattered most. Late-cycle conversations in the common area, Erithya telling stories about her people while Dom listened. Morning meals where she tried and failed to cook human food, her frustration endearing. Evenings spent in comfortable silence, her head on his shoulder as they watched old holovids. The physical intimacy grew gradually, naturally, a touch that lingered, kisses that deepened. The night she appeared at his quarters, uncertain but determined, and stayed until morning. They were careful with each other, learning boundaries and preferences. Erithya's combat training made her hyper-aware of vulnerability, but with Dom, she allowed herself to be soft, to be uncertain, to be human in all the ways that mattered. And Dom, who'd spent years keeping everyone at arm's length, found himself opening up, talking about his family, his guilt, the years of running from himself. Erithya listened without judgment, her presence steady and solid. "You honor them by living," she said one night, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest, "by allowing yourself joy again." "Is that what this is, joy?" she considered. "I think so. It is unfamiliar, but yes, I think this is what joy feels like." Dom pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her. "Yeah, me too." The station administrator, Corva, approached him one day in the markets. "Your friend's been asking around about Veydrath relics. Found something that might interest her." She led him to a storage unit in the station's lower levels. Inside, carefully preserved, was a meditation chamber, ancient Veydrath design, the walls inscribed with flowing script. "Salvaged from a colony ship years ago," Corva explained. "Been sitting in storage because we couldn't find a buyer. Figured you might want it." Dom paid her asking price and had the chamber installed in the Nomad's cargo bay. When he showed Erithya, her reaction was worth every credit. She stood in the entrance, hand pressed to the inscribed walls, tears streaming down her face. This is a memory chamber. My people use them to preserve our history, to commune with those who came before. Can you use it?" "I do not know, but I would like to try." That night, she entered the chamber and began the meditation ritual. Dom waited outside, watching through the observation glass as she settled into the center, her breathing slowing to that eerie stillness. Hours passed. He dozed in a chair, jerking awake when Riene touched his shoulder. "She's been in there for 8 hours, Riene said quietly. "Is that normal?" "I don't know." They waited. Dawn cycle came and went. When Erithya finally emerged, her eyes were distant, unfocused. Dom caught her as she swayed. "Eerie? I saw them." Her voice was thick with emotion. "My people, the memory bearers, they showed me. Everything." She looked up at him, and the weight in her gaze was staggering. "The Veydrath are not extinct. There are others, scattered, hidden, but alive." Dom's breath caught. "Where?" "I do not know. The memories are fragmented. But there are colony ships that escaped the schism. Settlements on forgotten worlds. Refugees hiding in plain sight." Her hands gripped his arms. "I am not the last, Dominic. I am not alone." The hope in her voice was almost painful to hear. Dom held her while she shook, while the enormity of it crashed over her. "We'll find them," he promised. "However long it takes, we'll find them. And if we do," she pulled back to look at him, "what if they have built new lives? What if they do not want to be found? Then we respect that. But at least you'll know. At least you'll have the choice." Erithya nodded slowly. Her thumb brushed across his cheek. "You would do this, help me search, even knowing it might take years." "Yeah, I would." "Why?" Dom smiled. "Because you're worth it. And because I think maybe I've been running long enough. Time to run toward something instead." She kissed him, fierce and desperate and grateful. When they broke apart, her expression had shifted from grief-stricken survivor to something approaching hope. "Then we search," she said. "Together." "Together," Dom agreed. 3 months later, the Nomad departed Haven's Rest with a full crew, repaired systems, and a new mission. Dom had sold most of his salvage contacts and invested in long-range scanning equipment. Riene had compiled every reference to Veydrath survivors, no matter how dubious. Caspar had mapped potential search routes, and Erithya had the memories, fragmented but growing clearer with each meditation session. They started with the closest lead, a rumor about a colony ship sighting near the Trajan Nebula. It turned out to be nothing, just sensor ghosts and wishful thinking. The second lead took them to a station where someone claimed to have met a Veydrath trader. The trail went cold. The third, fourth, fifth, all dead ends, but they kept searching. Months turned into a year. The Nomad crossed sectors, followed whispers, chased shadows. They found relics, ruins, evidence of Veydrath presence, but no survivors. Until the day Erithya's ears perked up in the middle of a supply stop. "I hear it," she whispered. "Someone speaking Old Veydrath, in the market." They followed the voice through crowded stalls until they found him, an elderly male with deep violet skin and gold eyes, his striations faded with age. He was haggling over ship parts, his accent thick but unmistakable. Erithya approached slowly. When she spoke in Old Veydrath, his head snapped up. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then he dropped the ship part and pulled her into an embrace, tears streaming down his face. They spoke rapidly in their shared language, words tumbling over each other. Dom hung back, giving them space. Riene stood beside him, her expression soft. "She found one," Riene said quietly. "Yeah, she did." When Erithya finally turned back to them, her face was radiant. "His name is Vektor. He knows of 3 other settlements. Small communities, hidden, but alive. Can he take us to them?" She translated the question, and Vektor nodded vigorously. More rapid conversation, then Erithya looked at Dom with eyes full of hope and fear and joy. "He says yes, but it will take weeks of travel, to places not on any map." She reached for Dom's hand. "Will you?" "Of course." He squeezed her fingers. "We've come this far, we're not stopping now." Vektor joined the crew, bringing with him stories and knowledge and the promise of connection. As the Nomad jumped to coordinates only he knew, Erithya stood at the viewport with Dom's arm around her. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not giving up, for believing there was something worth finding." "There was. There is." Dom kissed her temple. "You," she leaned into him, watching the stars streak past. "I was so afraid of being the last, of carrying that weight alone." "You're not alone. Not anymore." "No." She turned to look at him, her expression fierce and tender. "I am not, and neither are you." They stood together as the Nomad carried them toward unknown coordinates, toward people who shared Erithya's blood and history, toward a future neither had imagined when Dom had first opened that stasis pod. It wasn't the ending either had expected, but it was a beginning, one they'd chosen together, and that made all the difference.